Life Audio.
Hello. Thank you for listening to Your Daily Bible Verse, the podcast that examines one verse each day to learn more about God and His will for our lives. I'm your host, Kyle Norman. After the short word from our sponsor, we will begin our new series, Moses, From Fearful to Faithful. Join us as we walk with this important figure and learn how God calls us into deeper faithfulness. Today's verse can be found in Exodus chapter 1, verse 17. The midwives, however, feared God and did not do what the king of Egypt had told them to do. They let the boys live. When I was first ordained, I was placed in the very church that I grew up in. In fact, it was the very community out of which my own father received his call to ministry. I was blessed to be in such a supportive environment. The community that had seen me grow up through Sunday school and youth group now saw me stand before them as an ordained minister. And one of my tasks as this newly minted clergy person was to visit a weekly small group. The group had been meeting for decades and had developed a strong bond amongst them. And because one of the members was housebound, the group met for an at-home church service every single week. I went to share a time of prayer and to celebrate Holy Communion with them. Every Wednesday for 2.5 years, I met with this group of elderly gentlemen. On one occasion, Art handed me a piece of paper. Art was the self-appointed record keeper of the group. As I unfolded and read the long faded printing, Art described what I was reading. Kyle, I want you to know that on this day, 16 years ago, this group surrounded your father as he was discerning his call to ministry. It is our delight to now share ministry with you. It may seem odd to begin a journey focused on the life and ministry of Moses with a reading that doesn't include him at all. Shouldn't we start with the baby in the basket? But the truth is, this is how his story begins. The book of Exodus opens with Israel undergoing a drastic change of circumstances. The land that once was open and hospitable has now turned hostile and threatening. A new king emerges who doesn't know the story of Joseph or the history of Israel, and so begins to oppress the people. And what's worse, out of fear and jealousy, this king orders that every newborn Hebrew male is to be slaughtered. But in the midst of this horrific scene, God proves his sovereignty in a radical and mighty way. See, in the king's mind, Yahweh would only work through powerful males. A threat to his kingly power could only come through male fighters wielding their strength and overthrowing the kingdom. But this God, who is miraculous and mysterious, unexpected and surprising, does the unthinkable. God works through a band of women. God flips the idea of human power on its head. See, in securing God's redemptive plan, God doesn't raise up an army of soldiers strong and muscular, but instead raises a fellowship of midwives. God secures the future of God's own people through the work of women focused on life, not death, birth, not destruction. These midwives, so often skipped over as we race to Moses' birth, they are instrumental to God's redemptive plan. It is their work that paves the way for Moses, and it is only because they defied the king that Moses was allowed to live. Moses can only accept his calling because the midwives were faithful to theirs. Moses' ministry is but an extension of theirs. So make no mistake, the exodus of Israel doesn't begin with the burning bush. It starts with midwives. Midwives bring about the presence of life. They nurture growth, possibility, and hope. The midwives dare to live in God's kingdom and work towards God's purposes, even when it goes against worldly power. And even though the midwives and Moses are separated both by time and geography, their ministries are bound together by the hand of God. Yes, Moses does great things, and is a man central to Israel's redemption. But his story doesn't begin with his birth, and his future calling doesn't happen simply when his feet hit the sand. In silent ways, years before he ever sees a burning bush or learns the divine name, God was at work. God began weaving together the intricate tapestry of his life and ministry before anybody was aware of it, because redemption is never a divine afterthought. As we journey through this series, we hope that you will contemplate your life with God. You might find yourself asking questions like, where is God calling me? How am I living before God? How can I embrace God more? And these questions are important. But before you begin those reflections, perhaps it would be useful to cast your attention backwards. Who are the midwives in your past? Who are the people who worked the will of God for you, perhaps without you even being aware of it? Who are the people that paved the way for you to experience the presence of God? Because God's presence and work in your life today, and whatever future God might be calling you to, is never a divine afterthought. It doesn't just arrive out of the blue. Like the midwives before Moses, God has already laid a foundation. God has already worked through other people and other events to bring you to the place you are now, so that you can attend to God's voice and step into the future that God invites you into.